So without further ado, our last panel of the day is using the blockchain. What services are we actually selling? By now, most of us with an internet connection have heard about blockchain. Many of us have heard about its potential use cases for providing enterprise services, investment opportunities, and even alternative financing. This panel looks to discuss the wide variety of services on offer, their popularity, and how we are going to sell them. So if you have any questions throughout the course of this panel, please go to www.slido.com, enter the code BlockShow 2019, select stage 1, scan the QR code on the screen with your phone, and then simply write down any questions you have. So please welcome your moderator, Jose Minamora, and panelists Mike Kayamori, Lark Davis, and Alvaro Fernandez.
Hi, I'm Jose Mitamura. I'm the CEO of Cointelegraph Japan. Today we've got very big personalities at the end of the day. It's actually one of the last sessions of the day, so thank you for staying till the very end. Starting with Mike, he's the CEO, as you know, of Liquids, which is one of the largest regulated exchanges in Japan, and also one of the very few unicorns we have from Japan. We are very proud of him, Mike. And we've got Lark, Crypto Lark, who is a big YouTuber influencer in the crypto space. He's got 100,000 followers on YouTube, educating people on how to trade crypto and what Bitcoin is, etc. Lastly, Alvaro, he's with JRR Crypto, and also with Alldex, which is the crypto options and futures exchange that JR invested. So in terms of the topic for today, it is the blockchain as a service. It's been almost 11 years since Satoshi Nakamoto wrote the white paper on Bitcoin and discussed blockchain in that context. But today, still blockchain mean many different things to many different people. It could mean traceability, transparency, STO. It could mean anything, depending on who you talk to. So the first questions for the panelists today is, where do you see the biggest mass or enterprise adoption in terms of blockchain as a service? What kind of services are you focusing at the moment in terms of where you're investing and how you're educating your YouTube viewers? Mike?
Yeah, so I wish I was the last one to speak on this, but no. So as an exchange, we believe that we're the enabler or the realization platform for blockchain application and blockchain service providers, right? So on our exchange, we have over 120 tokens listed. And we're probably the first exchange that allowed an IEO. So when people are still talking about ICOs, we allow token issuers to conduct their public offering or token offering on a regulated exchange, doing full KYC, because raising capital on their own website with the potential hack and all the risk associated should not be part of a blockchain token issuer. That should be something that we should enable. And then after that, allowing that token to be listed and creating a secondary market with liquidity, with market makers, that's what we allow. We allow the blockchain application providers to flourish, raise capital from their community, and have it listed on our exchange. So among just sharing some data points on the tokens that are listed on our platform, it's unique from trade finance, healthcare, games and apps, to stable coins. If I knew what was going to be that killer app for mass adoption, it's going to be very difficult because for institutional or financial side, maybe it could be trade finance. For logistics and supply chain, there's a blockchain application that makes a lot of sense for that. And then I think, but just looking at from a mass adoption perspective, I actually look at stable coins and potentially like Libra or even the Gram token. Obviously, the biggest challenge for those people now are the government regulation side as well. But when you look at mass adoption, I look at the payments element that with the stablecoin side where it makes it better, faster, cheaper, that will allow a mass adoption of crypto and blockchain.
I think we're looking at a situation right now where we're going to have cryptocurrency be as ubiquitous as email, and that companies who are not hopping on board with cryptocurrency payments, cryptocurrency for their accounting, for their invoicing, for a whole wide range of services, not to mention, of course, everything that we see coming with gaming and, like I said, healthcare and all these different use cases, they're going to be getting on board and providing blockchain as a service to these companies to help them onboard to blockchain is going to be such a massive business opportunity for the companies who actually get that right, who can place themselves there to help basically blockchainize the world, because we're moving in that direction where everyone's going to be doing it, and it's going to be revolutionary for the companies who get it right early on and who are the early adopters in that situation.
I fully agree with both of you guys. And there's plenty of use cases or situations where you see established institutions, IBM, Ernst & Young, etc., offering blockchain as a service for the companies which are traditional and are looking to onboard blockchain as a technology in the background, in the foreground, for supply chain, for multiple application cases. From the crypto side, from the exchange perspective, fully agree as well. But if we take a step back and see it as how to sell blockchain, I was actually agreeing quite a lot with Da Hongfei this morning. He was explaining a little bit about how internet should be actually built and the layers. And the value you could extract out of blockchain technology is not by monetizing the technology itself. It's rather by establishing that protocol, that first layer, bringing the value in, capturing the users, offering those use cases from financial perspective, different applications, and those applications are the ones that you actually can utilize to monetize on top. And that's when all the traditional companies could actually step in and move forward, utilizing that technology, but instead of from the protocol layer, from the application layer.
Interesting. So Mike has discussed the financial applications, trading, exchanges, STO, things like that, and then you discussed the Web3 stack that Da Hongfei has sort of preached this morning. It's all interesting. I always get this from like people I talk to outside the industry, that I think blockchain is good, but crypto is kind of speculative and it's bad. And one of the questions I wanted to ask today was, how do you respond to people like that? Blockchain, we're talking about blockchain as a service. Can we separate blockchain from crypto? A blockchain and crypto separable? How do you respond to people who sort of maintain this thesis?
I think if you want to have incentivized public networks, and we're talking about public versus really the permission networks, and that's what the conversation comes down to, is what kind of future do we want to build? Do we want to keep building more walled gardens? Because we have a lot of walled gardens on the internet right now, and the incentives models for those walled gardens are starting to crumble. We can see that the power of these organizations to do censorship and all these different things is already becoming problematic. So when we start to talk about the people who are saying blockchain, not Bitcoin, that's a dangerous conversation, because essentially what they're saying is we don't want decentralized public permissionless networks. We want to be in control. We want permission networks. We want networks that we control. We control the access to them. We can shut down accounts. We can do all these things. That's why things like Libra, for example, I'm not particularly excited about it, even though it's really poking the hornet's nest in terms of getting regulators excited and getting a lot of people reacting to it. It's you look at what Bitcoin is and the idea of decentralization and actually building open, decentralized finance that's going to empower people, not disempower people. I think it's a really big difference that we're seeing there. The permissioned blockchains and the corporate-run blockchains, not super exciting in my opinion.
What I would add from my side, I'm based out of Shanghai, China. That's one of the big countries that you can actually see that standpoint. From a governmental perspective, you have rather pro-blockchain, but a clear against cryptocurrencies. And I would say you can actually split up, saying you can have actually a blockchain without really focusing from the cryptocurrency side. Cryptocurrencies are more linked. I mean, the underlying technology is the blockchain. But there's multiple cases, examples, where the technology itself, how you were mentioning, they're trying to capture it and controlling and extract the value from that side, which, as a matter of fact, for many use cases, it's okay, it's respectable. You can utilize this. Many companies, from a traditional perspective, they can have their permissioned blockchains, nothing against it. I just see a way bigger use case as a whole from a decentralization perspective, which has been actually one of our theses from JR's side, investing in decentralized and client-facing applications, which are going in that sense. Yeah.
That's a really good point, actually, about for companies, especially for internal operations with companies, those permission blockchains make sense. But there's the use cases, like you said. Yeah.
It's like one next step in terms of accountability. It's next point in terms of innovation from how to hold a ledger. You can actually be more efficient from a hand side. You're just missing out from a whole new variety of use cases, utilities, and opportunities in that case. Yeah.
So I because we're an exchange, and also blockchain and crypto, but then what's the definition of crypto, right? Is it a digital asset? Is it a token? Is it a crypto asset? There's many things. I look at it as it's the flip side of the same coin, right? Because who's going to maintain and continuously build that blockchain or create that ecosystem? How are you going to reward that? Yeah. How are people going to monetize it, right? And especially if it's from a token issuer who's going to build a specific blockchain, whether if it's a public or private or permissionless or open source or not. There's ways they need to monetize it. And there's many ways. You monetize it from the nodes, you monetize from the token sale, you monetize from secondary. There's many ways to do it. But if I include crypto within the token, it's something that is absolutely, I think, necessary, especially for early entrepreneurs who aspire to build something new, and now they want to build an open platform based on whether if it's a blockchain or DLT, and they want to have that initial capital to start out with, and also potentially to monetize it in the future. I think it's absolutely necessary to have that crypto element that is tightly coupled with blockchain. But if you're a company like a Facebook, or able to do a foundation, and you can make money through the basket of interest that you put in, maybe you don't need a token that you can sell or something like that. So it does vary.
Yeah. Contrast to what Mike has just said, you just discussed in the back room, how the Chinese government was saying blockchain is good. We were going to be, Xi Jinping issuing the big directives on blockchain, but not Bitcoin or crypto. Looking from Shanghai, what was your view on that?
From the last statement that Xi Jinping was having?
Yeah.
Well, first, a massive exposure towards non-crypto native institutions, individuals. There was a massive pump in terms of searches on WeChat and Baidu and so on about blockchain, about Bitcoin. That is initially great. And then from the institutional side, there's way more proactivity in terms of engaging with the blockchain technology itself. By having such a clear statement from the governmental institution in China, suddenly everybody from the non-crypto industry was like, okay, I need to take a look at it. I need to see how I can profit out of it. I can build and integrate myself within this new technology. So,
right. Okay. So China seems to have given the big endorsement from the big brother to blockchain as a service in the context of probably enterprise adoption. In your host country, in respective host country, how far is your government in terms of really pushing that agenda forward, integrating blockchain in the future technologies that the countries will need to upgrade their economy?
I think we're seeing a really, really different picture around the world. I mean, I'm in New Zealand, and we are definitely behind the curve when it comes to blockchain regulation, to cryptocurrency regulation. We have recently allowed for salaries to be able to be paid legally in Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, which is a great step. Other countries have been doing that for a while. I think there's a really great opportunity for any country, obviously, but we've seen quite a few of the smaller countries or even bigger economies. Japan's been an absolute leader, as I'm sure Mike can tell us a bit more about it in a minute, but we see Switzerland and Malta and all these other countries who have been innovating in that space. And I think really any country that doesn't innovate when it comes to cryptocurrency regulation, to welcoming blockchain into the economy on multiple levels are going to get left behind.
Yeah, so I'll talk about Japan, right? So Japan clearly, again, people have different viewpoints, but they want to kind of consciously split and divide between blockchain and crypto. So on the blockchain side, there's almost zero regulation. There's a lot of proof of concept that's happening, but it's still not in production. It's not going to that next level. But it's something cool as an enterprise. If you're working on a proof of concept on blockchain and building an application, that's good. The problem is, for example, there's a lot of interesting blockchain application service providers globally. They want to tap into Japan, but they want to tap in not only from a partnership perspective, but they also want their tokens to be listed. Right now, unfortunately, in the past year and a half, 2 years, there's no new listing. Only recently there was one that has been listed. But it takes that much time to be listed. So it needs to, from global token issuers or blockchain service providers who want to tap into Japan and work with enterprises on products, they also want to make sure that they can be listed on the platform, that their token has utility there as well. So it's Japan, again, they were the first country to regulate cryptocurrency from a Payments Act perspective. Now they're looking in from a capital market and a financial instrument perspective. And hopefully with that coming in, that it will allow both the application side, but also on the token side to coexist together.
I'm originally Spanish. From that side, Spain has never been leading country in terms of regulatory instances in Europe, so they're always attached towards the bigger picture in Europe, and some of the leading governments in this case, which are looking towards moving forward in terms of regulation, etc., is Germany, for example. And as a matter of fact, last month I was visiting Berlin, and I came across that the BaFin, the German SEC, came up after sitting down with quite a few blockchain profiles from the German industry, with a very proactive and friendly regulation, especially towards tokenization of securities, for example. Yeah. So they were approving quite a few tokenization of securities, real estate, different assets, etc. And there was even a whole proposal for example, digitalizing the European currency in a plan of 5 years. Just a proposal, but yet actually a step towards that. And it's not really Estonia or Malta. I'm not giving away importance from those jurisdictions, but seeing it from the highly regulated countries is a big step in that sense.
Thank you. We've got, I think, 10 more minutes. And before we go to the Q&A session, maybe one of the last questions would be, in your leadership roles in the industry, so Liquid and JR, you invested in Binance early on, and as the influencer, do you get
to speak up a little bit more?
Right. Okay. Sorry. Do you get solicitation from enterprise and the governments in terms of advisory on what they should do, how they should integrate or adopt blockchain, what kind of services they are requiring at the moment, and are there moments where is that what you really want? Is that the benefits of the blockchain that you want to integrate?
As I was saying from the beginning, from my perspective, is not the main benefit that you see from the bigger picture, from the longer-term development and value you can extract out of it. But there's a demand that needs to be met from the supply side. And who can give the guidance, the technological development, the resources, the blockchain as a service? It's the crypto-native industries. JRR Consulting, for example, they actually focus on providing this kind of guidelines to the non-native institutions. We were just sitting here in Singapore with one of the banks that were actually keen and curious to learn more, because they hear those buzzwords, blockchain, Bitcoin, etc., but they don't really know where to grab it from. So they need that support in that sense. And if there's anything that can actually met their requirements, on you go. I mean, by any means. Yeah.
One thing I'd really like to see is more countries bringing in really positive kind of regulation. I know regulation is not a sexy word at all, but we look at some case examples that we've seen recently. With France, for example, they're going to bring in cryptocurrency education into the high schools, which is game-changing. We're going to have a whole generation of French kids who are going to grow up learning about cryptocurrencies. That's the kind of government incentivization that it's cool to see. If we start looking at the more restrictive policy, I mean, there are still countries where the trading and selling of Bitcoin is banned, like Saudi Arabia and Nepal and Algeria and a couple others. That's a ridiculous situation. We've got a global technology that we're looking at that is not being globally welcomed by, we have such a different situation happening in different countries. Even within unions like the European Union, you have 20-some countries who are all approaching it differently. So some more unification of a global process of really how do we, as a wider society, welcome new technologies into the world, I think is something we can really be looking at. And I look at some of these really positive examples that have happened with France or with Switzerland or with Japan or Malta and places like this as being innovators in that space. And I hope that we can see other regulatory bodies taking lead from that.
Mike, do you work with the enterprises and the governments?
Yeah, so what was your question again? What we want the regulators to do, or what was your question again?
Yeah, my question was, how do you work with the government and enterprise when they ask for, advice on how to integrate blockchain how to integrate their blockchains, into their, I don't know, traceability or, into their systems. Do you work with the governments?
Absolutely, we're a regulated exchange.
All right.
Right. So I think, it's actually a very deep question, and I struggle because my thoughts and opinions changed over time. Yeah. So we're in our 5th year. So we started in 2014, and if you remember, 2014, Ethereum was still not there. It was only Bitcoin. I mean, maybe Litecoin and a few others. But if you wanted to operate an exchange, it had to be Bitcoin and fiat, US dollar, SGD, JPY. So you had to work with a bank. It was only after 2016, 17 that there were stable coins or crypto only, where because we don't touch fiat, we can do whatever we want. Those days are gone. Right? So from our perspective, starting in 2014, we had to work with banks. We had to work with regulators. There was no other option. So I was always pro-regulation. Right? It will bring clarity. It will bring certainty. It will bring, weed out the bad actors. Right? But that's not really the case as well. The global market is so inefficient. It's not a level playing field that actually being very pro-regulation, you got to be careful what you wish for, right? I mean, because there's a lot of things, new guidelines, new enforcements, new things that come in. So now, looking back, it needs to be arm's length. That said, is a sandbox environment the right way to go, where you have a year and a half to sort things out, and that's not good either. I think we still don't have a happy medium in terms of, especially from a crypto and exchange and perspective, where is that right comfortable boundary, right? Because it's so difficult to enforce it, as Luke mentioned, like globally in a unified way. Even when the FATF puts in a travel ban, how can you practically enforce that? So it's very difficult. And I was just in a roundtable right now where the former chairman of CFTC was saying, when you just look at cryptocurrency or Bitcoin, they just had the 10-year anniversary, the 11th year after the white paper came out. Ethereum is only 5 years. When you look at the monetary system, when you look at gold, which has been around for 6,000, 7,000 years, it's just a drop in the bucket. And that's why it's a little too dangerous for regulators to start all coming in and try to regulate everything, because it's evolving. Crypto is evolving. Exchanges are evolving. Just in a year, now people are going from spot to futures market. It's so different. And how can a regulator always be aligned with how things are going? They're always a step or two behind. So to me, it's very difficult in terms of finding that right medium, and I don't have an answer. That said, can you just say, no regulation, do whatever you want? Then it's going to be a big problem as well. So trying to find that right happy medium is the challenge of the entire industry. Because look at what happened with Libra. Look at what happened with Telegram's Gram token. Look at what happened with, to a smaller extent, Kin with Kik Messenger. These are all messaging companies that had millions and hundreds of millions and billions of users, right? So if they were able to launch their tokens, that would have an enormous mass adoption in the world. Those are all being scrutinized right now, right? So that's the challenge of the industry that I think we need to overcome. And I don't know how that will happen.
Thank you, Mike.
I fully agree with that. It's a very good point in the fact of regulation is, on very few cases, proactive. It's more reactive. It's a reaction chain that actually happens afterwards. Correct. So if you're an innovator, a startup which is creating something new, which in blockchain happens quite often, you're in that deep blue where, okay, you're innovating, but what now? How are we taking this to be compliant? Especially if you're a not decentralized but centralized application. So it's a little bit of a gap that needs to be overcome. Because maybe it's my perspective, but regulation was rather perceived as negative in many...
In almost every industry.
Yes, in every industry. And it's many times, if it's done well, I must admit, if it's done well, what gives it a sustainable standpoint to be able to build on top and grow from multiple perspectives. So, yeah.
So if I were to add, I apologize if I were to add, it's also a reflection of how potentially disruptive crypto and blockchain is, right? You never see governments now all clamoring and G20 talking about, and intergovernmental organizations like the FATF all coming to a nascent industry that's only 5 to 10 years old, right? But there's a reason why they're all coming and they're trying to slow things down and put a lot of hurdles, is because they believe it's truly disruptive, which means it might take another 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but it's not going to stop. It's going to change the world. So I believe the golden age of crypto and blockchain is going to happen. The problem is when, right, and how. But it's going to happen, right? I have no doubt.
From your interactions with the governments, do you think that the authorities are more sophisticated today than like a year ago or 2 years ago?
Governments?
Yeah, the governments.
Oh, they're highly intelligent. They're smart. They study. That's what they do all day, right? They look at history. They look at all the consequences, and they are overprotective. But that's their job. That's their job, right? And again, when you're overprotective and you want to protect the base common denominator, there's a trade-off between innovation and safety. And that's the challenge, where the beauty of innovation was always creative disruption, right? Where you can fail, but fail fast and create something better. What's happening is you're not allowing companies to innovate or fail, right? You're coming in trying to put guidelines and restrictions on it. And I think that's the challenge. But boy, you talk to regulators in Japan, regulators here, they are very much understanding. Would they understand the deep technology? Probably not. but the impact of it and all these things, they're very knowledgeable. So again, I think we will find a happy medium. I just think it's going to take a little bit more time.
You make a really great point, Mike, and I think the regulators from the people that I've seen and met and the things that I read, very intelligent people. The problem is their bosses, who are politicians, who are not always as clever as the experts who are in charge of some of these different departments. And we see some statements from politicians who obviously have no idea what's going on, but they make a reactionary statement. Sometimes some of them are clever, but
No, but I think that's because they represent a special interest, right?
Exactly.
Their voters or their base or their
The big
their
banks.
donors and
Yep.
incumbents. So they have a certain agenda,
That's
right? So I
right.
think that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Do we have more time for questions? Maybe just
Actually,
finishing off.
Maybe from the
Yeah.
public. Any?
Oh, maybe, okay, we can field some questions if anyone has one. No?
just want to say you guys are all awesome. Thank you so much for sticking around for
Exactly.
for the
Yeah.
final chat. I know it's been a long day of conferencing and networking, but we really appreciate you coming out to hear us talk.
If we have a couple more minutes, then we finish with more specific questions about BaaS, blockchain as a service, has a specific meaning as, what they're doing at the Hyperledger, Quorum, IBM, Amazon, even Baidu and Chinese, companies are doing. What's your view on how this space will evolve in terms of really the proper blockchain as a service?
There's a very good example that I first came across from my colleague Dimitar. One of the biggest traditional institutions, Ernst & Young, EY, what did they do? They deployed, I don't know how many hundreds of developers for 2 years, thousands, millions of hours of development into an open source protocol called Nightfall, and they put it up to the open. So that goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of the panel, that don't try to monetize directly the protocol itself, because if you can deploy properly something that can be either open or permissioned, you develop it yourself, you leave it up to the open, and then you guide the institutions in and show them how to monetizing and have the consulting fees, whichever you want to charge on top of that. That's something that fits way better to the model or the initial ideology of what blockchain is dedicated for. So I was actually quite surprised to see one of the more old-minded companies in the sense making this move, this step. So.
Thanks. Any views about? Yeah.
No, I think that Ernst & Young story is actually a really good point that you bring up, because it just shows that you can do it on a public blockchain. You don't need to be building a permissioned walled garden. And that, I think, is game-changing. We've also seen this year that Microsoft is building an identity application on top of Bitcoin, which is very interesting as well. So again, we can use public networks. We don't have to go the permissioned route. When we talk about blockchain as a service, it can be teaching companies how to build on public networks, not teaching them how to build their own walled gardens.
Yep.
Yeah, if I were to add, right, I think innovation always happened from entrepreneurs. It's not the incumbents, like Innovation at Dilemma, the book as well. So the beauty of, for example, the crowd here or the audience is compared to the traditional conferences and all those, they're young. People here are young, right? They're at least...
They're young-minded.
And young-minded as well. Yeah. Young-minded, even if they're old. So, but compared to other conferences, they're much more open. They're much more in terms of liberal. And that's a beautiful thing. And these are the younger, again, the young at heart and the young mind these are the people that are going to build the future, right? And you want to spur, you want to support that. And that's, as an exchange, what we want to do. We want to be the place where they can raise capital. We want to be the place where they can list it and create a secondary market. We want to be that platform that enables blockchain service providers to flourish, right? And the good thing is, in 10 years, 20 years, the people here are going to be the older generation, and there's going to be much more, the next generation after the millennials, and these people will be coming in. So it's an enormous future, right? Yeah, Microsoft, Azure, all these guys, IBM, that's fine. But I think the real big killer are going to be coming from people in this audience or who are more native in this space. So it's, again, I don't know the timeline, but it's going to be very interesting.
I'm looking forward to telling those stories in 20 years. Back when I was your age, Bitcoin transactions took an hour to send.
Correct.
Since Mike mentioned entrepreneurship in the space, maybe let's finish the session with coming back to the question: how do we sell blockchain as a service to the public? How do we become entrepreneurial in selling such thing as blockchain? We come back to the idea that it can mean many things to many people, but as entrepreneurs on stage, how do we sell to the young people?
If I had to put it into one sentence, I would say don't sell the protocol, sell the application. So create the value on the protocol layer, on the ecosystem. There's plenty of hubs, ecosystems which are being built, like Binance with BNB, Aldex with AXA. So don't sell that. Let the value come through, create the value for the users, and sell the application. That would be my statement.
Make it relevant, make it fun, get people involved. I'm very excited about, for example, what's happening with gaming right now. We see there's some great projects out here that are doing some really cool stuff with gaming. There's quite a few others that Engine are working on, and that's the whole next generation of kids who are going to grow up natively using cryptocurrency assets in the same way that we send an email. And that's going to be big.
Yeah, so for sustainable growth, I don't think you can sell a blockchain service. It has to be bought, right? So at the end of the day, right, you can't say, hey, please buy it because it's a blockchain service. It has to be better, faster, cheaper, the 10x experience. Yeah. Right now, maybe at a consensus algo level, it's not there yet. But the beauty of technology is that it makes leaps and bounds, right? So we're talking about still the very early days of blockchain or DLT, and these are all going to improve. So, but at a consumer or customer level, they don't care what's behind that unless they have a philosophy or some kind of a religious thing about it has to be open and permissionless and anti-government and all these things. But at the end of the day, it needs to be better, faster, cheaper, and much more open. And I think that blockchain and DLT is an enabler of that, right? But it has to be at the product level attractive and good for the service to be sold.
Same happened 20 years ago with the internet. There's an interesting analogy. At the beginning, everybody was interested on the intranets. They were getting their own intranets. Nobody was caring about the whole interconnectivity, which was open. Now, you tell me, which one is the main?
Correct.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Do we have more?
There's one
Yep.
gentleman.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting panel. I have a question actually as an exchange. You have access to basically your voters, which are your users. Why don't you as exchanges don't just give votes to your users and just create a regulation that is based on these votes? So if the main exchange just cooperates and source the users that they have as voters, you can create your own regulation that will be more informed and that will be democratic. And then the regulator cannot really say anything against it, because that will be probably the best way to convince the regulator to tell them, look, this is this votation. We, by the way, use blockchain to do it. And as an exchange, you can create a blockchain-based democracy.
So I think that's a question for me. Yes. No, I mean that's a. I'm not sure if I should say that's a great question. That's a good question. That's why there's decentralized exchange, right? Empower the people and making it open so that they can decide, they can do atomic swaps and peer-to-peer and all those. But from a regulator perspective, I think it's going to be increasingly more that at the end of the day, who's going to take accountability when something happens? When again, they always look at it from a money laundering perspective or how to fight terrorism or crime and all these things. And over time, even if you say it's a decentralized exchange or a user custody wallet, they're going to come and say, like, if something happens, who's going to be accountable? Who created the original protocol and all these things? So when I look at that, it's all good if you say, hey, we're going to empower the users and make it truly democratic, and all the rules. That was the DAO, was it DAO, or right, where everything was going to be done that way. But again, when there's issues and bugs and all these things, how are we going to remedy that? So there were initiatives like about a year ago where a lot of the minted crypto millionaires or billionaires were trying to create a new country, right? And they were trying to create a truly liberal country where there was no tax and it was all based on like staking and all those. Again, it's easy to say that, but in practicality, it's going to be very difficult. And also, when you talk with regulators or people from the government side, not from the crypto side, they're saying at the end of the day, when you become old, when you have health issues, when there's a war, when you need to go to hospitals, who's going to take care of you, right? I mean, can you truly say you're a global citizen? No, I'm truly freedom and all those that. At the end of the day, you have to still be a citizen of a certain country. Maybe for certain people, you can truly be liberal, but for a majority of people, you're always, at the end of the day, you're going to need a country or somewhere to fall back on. And those people will not probably allow you to have a truly democratized, which is outside of their government purview in terms of even an exchange, right? So I think there needs to be, that's why I always come back and look at, there needs to be a happy medium between a regulator and also the consumer. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but.
To add a little bit on top of that, there were actually a few exchanges which came up in the last few years enabling community voting, but up to a certain extent. So you could vote for listings, for different engagements, but I can't agree more with Mike in this case. Like, from a regulatory perspective, if you're centralized, if you're holding custody, if you're holding accountability, if you have to provide AML, KYC guidelines, you cannot leave it open to a community voting, basically, that would be deciding on behalf of the exchange itself. Because in the end, if it's centralized, it's the exchange itself which is accountable in that side. And it would fit the model for decentralized exchanges merged with DAOs in this case. That would be a model that would fit in this case. But we're a little bit far away from seeing that kind of technology scale. So we might be heading there in the future.
Did I answer your questions?
Kind of. I think the question was less to replace the regulator, but more to justify or to actually underline certain rules that are accepted by all the exchange as kind of best practice, and basically have the user base also agreeing with these rules. And if you have the votes of your users, it is a better information than just assuming things about the industry. So
I understand. So from that perspective, again, the global needs to be a level playing field first, because if it's not, it's very difficult to have exchanges aligned and do it. But then within a certain common understanding, there are all these associations that happen, and they represent the common interest of the exchanges and the users of that, and these are like SRO, like self-regulatory organizations, and those things are happening.
But not in a worldwide context.
It's very difficult. I think it's very difficult. Right. Yes.
Hi, my name is Suresh Nichani. I'm from New York. If you fast forward about 5 years from now, I wanted your opinion on what's going to happen to utility tokens, and are they going to be around, and are they going to get more more weight or more momentum or less? And related to utility tokens is, of course, tokenomics. Is the whole tokenomics, the importance of tokenomics and good tokenomics going to become, like stars or the skyscrapers of the blockchain? Yes or no? So I'm just trying to fast forward 5 years from now.
Please,
I could say that utility tokens aren't going anywhere. The biggest problem we saw with utility tokens is that a lot of tokens were launched with no utility for the tokens, and they had no networks to have a utility for a token on. But the idea of a utility token, we can look at the BNB token or the Cash token or other tokens. They've got utility, and the exchanges are great early utility tokens. If we start to look forward 5 years, 10 years from now, we're going to see a lot of different utility tokens coming out. And I think that the 2017 utility token craze probably taught a lot of lessons that you better not be launching a utility token before you actually have a place for that token to be used. Otherwise, you're going to burn everybody, and you're probably not going to get a lot of investment coming in from it. So they're definitely here to stay, but I think we're going to see them get better in the future. Whether or not they're going to be a good investment, I think the speculators will always speculate. If you're buying utility tokens, you should be buying them to actually use them as a utility on a platform that you want to use, not because you hope the price is going to 100x, even though it might.
Yeah, from an investment perspective, I would say that given the excessive interest in tokenized investments during that period of 2017, there was an overfunding situation into tokens. And many projects were getting quite funded, which were actually not really probably solving the best problem in their industry, etc. And the name itself says utility tokens. It's not speculative tokens. How many? So to the audience, how many of you use an altcoin for an actual utility, which is not speculation? Raise your hand. I see 3 people. The current best utility for these altcoins has been speculation, which from an investment standpoint is respected. You can speculate on it, especially on the Asian side. On the Chinese side, it's predominating massively. But you need to get a little bit more down to earth. And these utilities has to be starting to be deployed. If it's on the supply chain blockchain, if it's on advertisement technologies, if it's on whatever, you need to see that utility coming into effect. And you do need the network itself. You need that network to have adoption for that utility to become a reality. And tokenomics are vital for that. So tokenomics decide if the token is going to be sustainable within that network or not. But predominating right now, it's speculative.
Yeah, so 5 years from now, that's like enormous amount. Like 5 years ago, it was only Bitcoin. Right now, there's 2,000, 3,000 tokens, and especially if security tokens and all these stable coins and all these things happen, there's going to be a proliferation of token, and there's going to be a more better token economy, and unit economics will start kicking in. Again, even in utility tokens, there's payment tokens, loyalty tokens. There's many of these things that are coming in. So at the end of the day, these are all putting things on the blockchain or digitizing it, which in finance and money, it was very difficult in the past, right? Where internet really democratized and changed how people consume information, how people buy things, and now it's the internet of finance, and things are truly digitizing it. And the best way to do it in an open finance area was to put it on the blockchain, whether if it's a US dollar on the blockchain or an asset on the blockchain or some kind of payment or utility on the blockchain. That's going to happen. But the more you do that, there's going to be more scrutiny from regulators. Right? So compared to the last 5 years when things really grow, now regulators are more coming in, so it's going to take a little bit more time. But once these are sorted out or it evolves, that it's going to continue to grow. Right? So it's very difficult for me, like maybe the Libra thing might take another 2 years. Right? But if regulators were not there, they would have launched Q1 next year. Right? So from that perspective, the timeline changes a lot when regulators or law enforcers start coming in. So it's very difficult to say 5 years from now it's going to be all tokenized, and all. It's very difficult to say that. But when you look at it from a longer time frame, it's absolutely there. Everything is going to be digitized, including money, value, medium of exchange, assets, certifications, and it's going to be, again, I think it's going to be an exciting time. The important thing is how we get there.
Great. Thank you, Mike. I think the time is up. I think we've actually got a longer Q&A session because this was the very last session of the day. Thank you for staying to the very end. Just wanted to thank all the panelists here. If you can give the big applause to the panelists here to finish the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.